Right, everyone, we might make a start. So, welcome. Thanks for attending. Welcome. I see Neil Ormerod online. How are you going, Neil? We may have some more join us on Zoom throughout the course of the lecture. It's a real delight to welcome Dr. Ruth Powell here for this lecture and to introduce her. She's an adjunct associate professor of the Centre for Religion, Ethics and Society. She's going to be speaking to us about the spiritual profile of Australians, which relates to her work as the director of the National Church Life Survey, which she has headed up for a number of years, or worked there and headed it up for quite a long time. She's a sociologist of religion who really is Australia's leading researcher. I think it's fair to say. Maybe you're too humble to say it, but I'm not. So she's really Australia's leading researcher and expert in all things religion and spirituality in the evolving demographics of Australia, and has done some pioneering research by global standards, I think. I'm also not humble enough to say. So Ruth, it's a great pleasure to welcome you. Ruth will speak for roughly 30 minutes, and then there will be an opportunity for Q&A afterwards. We're all looking forward to hearing what you have to say, Ruth. I'll hand over to you now.
Yes, thank you. Thank you. Well, I asked Jonathan, I said, who will I expect to see and what are their backgrounds? And I said, are they all, historians and theologians? And he gave me a bit of a flavour, but I'm coming from a social sciences perspective today. So what I'm hoping to do is invite you. This is a journey where I'm learning things. I do have a long history of sort of watching the contemporary Australian landscape, religious and spiritual landscape. But I wanted to sort of, perhaps today, I'm being curious about what I'm seeing, and it's not fully thought through, and it's not, I'm not coming with a package that I'm trying to pitch to you. But I'm looking at the evidence as a social scientist and going, what is going on here? What do we see? So perhaps I may challenge some stereotypes, some assumptions today, but what I'll try and do is bring the evidence. And I am wary because I'm thinking I don't want to just sound like a Pollyanna for the Christian church, particularly, an apologist going, see, it's all okay, they're fine, it's good. So that's always a challenge because I hold this role, having worked for over 30 years, as a critical friend to the church. I'm a person of faith, obviously. I just told you, missionary kid, minister's kid, involved in ministry my whole life. So I am, a person who follows Jesus. With my work, though, I have had the role of being that critical friend or the messenger that someone says, I'm going to use my disciplinary skills as a social scientist, and I'm going to do some truth telling and some hard things to the church, which they have not always thanked me for, and so, but the work is framed again in this space, which we often call mission research. So it's got that sort of heart of wanting to connect church and community more effectively. So that's the heart, but I come with sort of just set that aside in a way, and I'm just going to show you what we're observing. And today I'm not speaking about what we're probably most well known for, which is our National Church Life Survey work. That is the largest, longest running survey of church life in the world. So there's the flex. That's the extraordinary thing that Australians together have achieved. No one can match it now because we started first. We didn't know it couldn't be done, and we started first. That work, so that's work that has been going for over 30 years and is an extraordinary collaboration. Who knows if it will keep going in the future? That'll depend on our denominations actually saying we want it and we will financially support it, because it cannot go ahead without a massive collaborative national effort. So that runs every 5 years with the national census. So the next one is due for 2026, but we'll see. This year, next year, it will be decided by everybody whether or not it'll happen again. There's an assumption that it will, but that's that project. But that project actually came after our first project, which was to try and understand the context and to try and speak to the churches about the context, which is why we have looked at evidence about the Australian religious and spiritual landscape for some time. So I'm drawing on that work today, and so we're listening to the voices of Australians, not church people, okay? So what I'll walk you through in the time is a very, very quick nod to religion in society. I thought religion, ethics and society, I can do this, you know. So religion in society, then I'll talk to you about our Australian community survey. So that's the piece of the project we work on. I'll give you a spiritual and religious profile of Australians from that body of work. A nod to spirituality and well-being, sort of, is there a link there? Which is tapping into some of our psychology of religion work. And we'll finish looking at the role of religious organisations from the point of view of Australians, and that will sort of bring together, well, where is it at the moment? And so let's go through. So this is the big picture of religion in society. We could spend, obviously, a huge amount of time here, not my purpose today, but I simply want to put this up as the backdrop. I went to a conference in Taiwan. It was the International Society for the Study of Religion last year, and this was some material out of the plenary, which I thought just gave us a capture of sort of the tone, if you like. It was a realistic conference. Even the Italians who have pushed back, you know, Italian religious researchers going, we're fine in Italy, we're different, it's not, you know, things are fine where we are because we're Catholics in Italy, you know. They were finally going, it's not fine in Italy. So the tone was, number one, the world is, you know, the end of the world, or at least as we know it, is being announced daily. So there was this apocalyptic vision that was being painted, this naming the issue of not dealing with environmental challenges in terms of, you know, the UN Secretary General saying we're on a highway to climate hell with our foot on the accelerator. This is our backdrop for religion in Australia, is this kind of thing. There's the idea of, you know, liquid society, but in that context, the place of religion being disposable, commodified, interchangeable and obsolete. Big ideas that I can guarantee you have all grappled with, sat with, thought about. This I've highlighted this piece, which I, you know, was I thought just captured something about the place of religion as well. We live in an enraged world. People are angry, anxious, disconnected, and disappointed. Although faith in God does not disappear, religion no longer has the same consoling power. And so it was a challenging conference because no one was pushing back, but it was real, you know, like the evidence is there in terms of religion in the world. Let's come to Australia again. This is sort of hand-waving to a huge amount of issues in Australia, but this is just, I picked this up from Barney Schwartz, who, reflecting on his time as religion editor in the Age over a period of time, and saying this is what, you know, my paper did. It typically only covered 3 religion stories: priests molesting children, the church in decline, and the troglodyte church holding back women and gays. That was it. And he said there was a period when they actually got to a more nuanced sort of capacity to speak about religion, but really then it went back to this. And that will be the stories. And while the media is going to paint a particular picture, I think for those who want to push back on that, you still have to listen to that narrative. And that is the narrative that our society is hearing as well. And sort of in terms of the posture, it is, that's what they know and what they think. If they know nothing else, this is what informs them. That's the backdrop. That's religion in society done, okay? So I've just flagged massive issues, but you can see the tone. I'm trying to set that backdrop to zooming in. So we have run this particular project called the Australian Community Survey. And let me tell you about that project. So our goal is to listen, not just to the church, but to actually start by listening to Australians and saying, what are their attitudes on various social issues, particularly what are their attitudes around religion and spirituality. And you can hear I keep using both words in case people have a, you know, an understanding of a word meaning a particular thing, to say all of that. I'm not going to try and define it, but all of that together. And also well-being. And during COVID, we put a lot of well-being questions in to really tap into what was going on. And we've been doing this work for many years now. Today, I'm presenting results that we collected in May. So we got it back in June. It's hot off the press, if you like. So these are the best and latest figures, which is why I'm going, they're not fully, I haven't even looked at all the results yet. So I'm giving you a real bird's eye view of what do we see as of May this year. CSU, Human Research Ethics Committee, did the work. We put everything through there.
Yes, we should.
Paul, I think you need to put yourself on mute. Thank you.
Right, okay. And we use, it's an online survey. It uses a panel, which is, what most people do. It's like a national poll, basically, but we run a national poll. What we do is we try and make sure it's representative of the Australian population, make sure it's got good mix of age, gender, location, and education, and we weight it to match the demographic profile, including education, because one of the things you may recall, polls trying to predict what the election will come out with, and they got it horribly wrong. And when we looked at it, they didn't do the work of weighting by education, and who they missed were the lower educated young males. And just by not doing that final piece of work, their predictions were wrong. But other than that, it's the best you can do. It's not perfect, but it's the best you can do with this sort of survey data. So the first point I want to make with what we learned from this picture is that many Australians have disengaged from religion. It's, there's no news here. And what they are saying in summary is, I don't belong and I don't trust religion. And so here's the evidence of that. And here I'm just actually going to use the national census data. The community survey finds the same thing, but we've got this one source. So the census asks, what is your religion? Well, that's what they've asked for the last 100 years. They may change it this time and muck up everything, because I'm going, I have 100 years of data here, please, just leave it alone. But they're thinking of doing something creative. So this might be it in terms of being able to track this trend. And on this chart, you can see from 1901 on the left through to 2021, what you can see is the Christian, those who identify as Christian, who affiliate with one of the Christian denominations, you can see was basically 95% in 1901, and you can see that green bar drop. So for the first time in 2021, it was it was a minority. First time in our history of tracking that. You can see what's grown. It's not a required question, so some people never answer it, but you can see the group that has, since 1971, when you started saying you were allowed to say you had no religion, which is a good cultural mark point, isn't it? To actually even say, I have the option of saying I have no religion. That has grown and is now at 39%. And the other group is the other religions, which you can see is very small, but is up to 10% now. So I don't belong in terms of, certainly, if you put the other religions and Christian together, you get back over that 50% marker, which we somehow, that halfway point, but in terms of the Christian group, that's a big change. The other thing is they say, I don't trust religion. The majority do not agree that religion is good for society. And what I want to show you here, though, is I've put in some instances, I've shown the trend over time since 2016, when we've asked it exactly the same way, although in 2022 we asked the Christian religion is good for society. That's 39%, so the little gap is there. What I want you to note there is this is a question that is responsive to the context. Look at 2018, where it plummets down to 33%. You go, So when they're answering the survey in 2018, what's going on? What's colouring their perception? And I'll just say Royal Commission, same-sex marriage is coming on the agenda, but that is, you can see Australians being, the situation has meant that that's responsive. Generally, it's been reasonably stable, but you can see that bumpiness. But in the end, it's still only 41%. As of May, say religion is good for society. So let's now come to, if that's sort of the majority position, if you like, I don't belong and I don't trust. What I want to do is introduce perhaps a bit more nuance now and look at the spiritual and religious profile. Because as social scientists, when we look at how you measure a person's religiousness, you actually need to look at a range of dimensions. And so what we have looked at here is firstly the dimension of identity or affiliation. And that says nothing about beliefs or practices, it's about identity. Is this my tribe? Do I belong? I don't belong, is what they say. We've also touched on salience. Is it important to me? Well, if you don't trust it, it's not, you're not saying it's important to your life. So those are two dimensions, but I want to pick up on public practice, private practice, religious experience, beliefs, and knowledge. So I'm going to walk you through data we have around these other dimensions to fill out the picture of religiousness in Australia. Let me touch on the identity question a bit more. And so this may be the first point where we go, oh, maybe that stereotype where I just said they've all thrown away their identity as Christian, we've got that message, we hear that. When you ask Australians, put yourself on the line from 0 to 10. Do you see yourself as a religious person? And then, do you see yourself as a spiritual person? Because one of the narratives is, oh, I'm spiritual but not religious. Religion is, the institution, they're all evil, I've thrown that out, but I'm still spiritual. One of the surprises here is when you ask those questions, yes, you can see at the bottom on the left, you can see that 33% say I'm not at all religious and 23% say I'm not at all spiritual. But other than that, the shape of those two, you don't have to absorb the detail, but the shape is actually fairly similar. And if we pull that together, we did what we call the cluster analysis. Atheoretical, we just said, how do Australians cluster? And when you do that analysis, you find 4 clusters that come together, just data-driven, 4 clusters come together. And this is where there perhaps may be a bit of a surprise. Firstly, let's go to the I'm not religious or spiritual, thrown it all out. That's 35%. So the two sort of axes are 0 to 10 spiritual, 0 to 10 religious. So down in the bottom, low on both, is the neither group. That's about 1/3 of Australians. Look at the surprise though. There's a few surprises here for me. I think one is that more than half are still using both spiritual and religious terms to describe themselves. Do you describe yourself as religious? And it's like, it's still there. It's still in their identity that being religious hasn't been totally thrown out, right? It's certainly less, but it's still there for more than half Australians. I am both religious and spiritual. The other surprise here is the SBNRs, spiritual but not religious. And that's been the big, headline, oh, we're all spiritual but not religious. That's the big growing edge. We can only find 12% who are actually not religious but spiritual. And they tend to be, just to fill the stereotype, alternative spirituality, older females.
Yeah.
So you got the stereotype there. That's who's that category, right?
And there's a gap in the market for religious but not spiritual, clearly.
Yeah. Basically because, people who are religious are also spiritual. That's it. Because you go, well, isn't that the point?
Yes.
Those two terms go together. The difference is the actively practicing spiritual and religious. The moderately religious or spiritual tend to be less practice, but they know people, they have history, they have relationship, and they still see themselves. So in terms of the churches, I would go, there's your low-hanging fruit, that 1/4 of Australians still have that identity embedded in their personal understanding. So that's a little nod back to identity. Let's come to practice now. We're looking at public practice. So on the left is the story that is well known and the media trumpets and everybody goes, oh yes, it's declined, hasn't it? Nobody goes to church anymore. And you can see from 1950, which was our high watermark, it was never better than this historically. It was lower than this previously, but that's the best it ever was. Post-war baby boom, high watermark, not that high compared to other countries. Down it went. Have a look though I'm now zooming in, it's like I'm putting the magnifying glass on the, again, 2016 to 2024. And if you look at the longer bar, you can see even from 2000 right through to now, the last, say, 25 years, it's actually remarkably stable. It's bumped around a bit, and you can see COVID. There was a moment when I went 2016, 2018, 2019, they were about 16, 18 months apart, the three measures. I'm going, oh my gosh, they've gone up. I didn't say anything, so I don't trust it yet. I'm not going to make a big deal of, it's church attendance or religious service attendance is going up. And then lucky I didn't, because COVID happened and it plummeted down, popped up again, down again, up again. But when you put that trend line through it and you think since 2000, we've been sitting at somewhere between 15 to 22%. It's been this, and every time you do a measurement, it'll be a different time and all the rest. But that sort of general trend has actually been stable for the last 25 years. So that might be a stereotype. You go, look, I'm not saying the church is not going to decline again. It probably will. Once we lose a couple more generations, it'll go down again. That's just, the church is old and we will keep losing numbers. That's just, I think, a demographic reality. But right now, we actually have a period of stability, and that 22% is the current measure of how many people attend a religious service, at least once a month. That's what that figure is, at least once a month. Here's a bit of a surprise. So I dove in and I did an age analysis. There's the 22%, but can you see the 18 to 34-year-olds have a report that they attend at least once a month? 30% of them. And this U shape is something I've seen over a number of years now. And again, I thought I'm going to pop in and just see if it's there in this data, and there it is. The U shape, which is not only our older Australians tend to be more likely to be attending worship services regularly. The group that is least likely are what I'm going to call the Generation X's and baby boomers. They're the bottom. And I'm going to say those are the people who have the microphone and are are the leaders in society at the moment. So what is the narrative we're hearing? We're hearing a narrative from people who are in key points in their careers and as giving leadership, and they have the lowest engagement in terms of public practice. So again, okay. Yes, younger people don't identify. They say no religion on the census. But what's going on here? This seems, challenging. Let's go to private religious practice. So here, I always find this quite astounding that it's as high as, I think this is high, but nearly a third of Australians say they pray or meditate at least once a week. So that's a private spiritual practice at least once a week. Now you've got a third who say they never do it, but I find that, quite high. Again, I thought, let me do the age breakdown and see what's going on. And the U shape is there again. The other three groups, the young adults, the 35 to 49-year-olds and the 65 plus, are all about the same. And there's that 50 to 64, substantially lower. So again, I don't do public practice and I don't do private practice either, not in the same way. Let's move on to experience. So the question here is about a mystical or supernatural experience, and it's a question that's asked around the world. It's a bit of a messy question, but it goes, have you had such an experience? And go, yes, I have. No, but I know someone. No, but I think it could happen. I'm open to the transcendent. No, I haven't had one and I don't think they're possible. And I don't know. So you can see it's messy, but it is trying to get to something beyond. So what we hear from Australians is a quarter of them have had such an experience, and a further 4 in 10 say, I haven't had it, but I think it could happen, or I know someone. So there's an openness to, again, that the other, put it like that. So this is a different, more nuanced, understanding of religiousness. Let's come to beliefs now. And what we ask here again is a question that's asked all around the world, and this is the way it's framed. But what we see here is nearly 6 in 10 Australians believe in God or some sort of spiritual or life force or higher power. So you're sitting at 6 in 10. So a quarter say there is a personal God, and then you've got this broader group going again, no, there's something beyond. There is a life force, a spirit, whatever language they want to use. Then if we use our classic agnostics, I don't know, we've got 1 in 5 Australians who take that position, I don't know, I think. And then your atheist, I do not believe there is any sort of spirit, God or life force, 21%. So 1 in 5 take that position. So again, there's this mistake that happens when you go, aha, people no longer identify, they must all be atheists. Well, no, one's about identity and belonging. Belief is a different dimension. This I also found interesting. I thought, let me go back and check over our last surveys and go, how's belief in God changed? Well, the story is little change. Very stable. Can you see those figures? I mean, you can poke around and see slight variations, but basically, I would say they're not statistically significant. So the story has really been very stable again, belief in God. So there's not been a erosion, if you like, over the last period of time, over the last decade in that space. Popped into the age to see what's going on here. And again, you can see the, not surprising now, the 50 to 64-year-olds least likely to believe in God, spirit, or a life force. And that 18 to 34-year-olds, I thought, oh, they've dropped down a little bit, you know, but what they're doing is they're saying, I don't know. I don't know. So they're not saying, I don't think there is something. They're saying there is, or I'm not sure. One dimension that's hard to get to in a survey is religious knowledge, which is more like, do you know the books of the Bible, or do you know biblical characters, or do you know who Muhammad was, or whatever it is, religious knowledge of some form. This is a general one, which is about the Christian faith, which is about just them reporting how familiar are you with the teachings and values of the Christian faith. And at the moment, 6 in 10 Australians say they are familiar, which means 4 in 10 say, no, I don't know about Christianity. I don't. The oldest Australians are the most familiar, say they are the most familiar, which makes sense. We ask another question about Jesus and who was Jesus, and we give them a range of options. And again, there's a very clunky, it's long, but we're trying to capture something that goes, from a Christian perspective, how would you describe Jesus? God in human form who lived among people in the 1st century. So just trying to get something there that goes, okay, you take that Christian view of Jesus. Then there are 2 categories that are not God, but a prophet or spiritual leader. Not God, just a normal human. Does not or did not exist, and I don't know. For me, it's extraordinary that 18% of Australians say Jesus didn't exist. So, which should horrify every good historian, you know. So in terms of the capacity of Australians, you know, we're back there. We're back to, let's just start with the fact that Jesus was, you know, the historical evidence is Jesus was a person at a time in history. There's a lot of historical evidence, better than many other historical characters that you might know. You have to start there before you then go, well, what do you think about the claims of who Jesus was? Let's actually just start with Jesus was a person of history. That's where we're at the moment. And this is, you know, young people again are the ones going, I don't know whether Jesus existed or not. But to have 18% of Australians say he didn't exist at all is quite confronting, you know. And one of these things you thought, didn't we deal with that? And go, no, we've got to deal with it again, you know, the basics. Coming back to salience, a minority of Australians say that religious faith or spirituality is important in shaping life decisions such as career, lifestyle. So you can say, I believe, I practice, I pray occasionally, I even attend, you know, a religious service sometimes, but then you go, is it salient in your life? And the answer is, well, for some. Let me now come, so that's the body of what I'm presenting there, which is that profile, just to sort of push through and go, things are more stable than we're expecting, and there is an age difference, which perhaps is unexpected. It's not just eroding as you go younger. I want to highlight one part of our work, which is around the link between spirituality and well-being, and there's a whole lot of work here that we could dive into, but it's a piece that we do again to say, Australians, where are you up to again during COVID? This is a key focus of ours. But one dimension of well-being is just about life satisfaction. So it's a cognitive decision about, are you satisfied with your life circumstances? And that's the pattern from no satisfaction to complete satisfaction. Generally, Australians are largely satisfied with their life. The red line, the heavy red line is 2021. So you can see that year it got a bit of a beating. Again, we think we know why, but overall it's been fairly stable. And being male or female made no difference to your life satisfaction. Levels of education, ethnic background made no difference to how satisfied you were with life. What we know from a lot of literature review work is that hundreds of studies have found, though, that religious beliefs are positively associated with higher well-being. Religious versus non-religious people, religious people will have higher levels of well-being, and those who have stronger religious beliefs have higher well-being than those with weaker religious beliefs and practices. So that's strongly been established, and the same with practices. Those who maintain religious practices have higher levels of well-being. So we took this theory, well, not just theory, all the evidence that exists, and said, let's test it in our data, our Australian Community Survey, and we found the same findings that support all those other studies, which, a bit of a worry in a way if we hadn't, but it was, Australians now, yes, confirmed. If you identify as Christian or identify as religious and spiritual or attend religious services, you are more likely to have higher levels of life satisfaction than other Australians. So it's just sort of another, underlining of something that people may have forgotten. Let me finish up by looking at religious organisations. So we're now moving from perhaps what is more an individual focus around religiousness to just taking that collective focus and thinking about the organisation or faith communities. And again, we're listening to Australians, and this is a big question we asked. Which of the following roles do you think religious groups, e.g. churches and other religious organisations, should fulfil? And they could tick anything on the list. It's a long list, and you won't be able to absorb all the detail. I won't hold it up that long. But I just want to highlight a few things for you. We're going to come back to what are the top 3 things: support the poor, encourage good morals, weddings, funerals, baptism, rites of passage. Then you see there's a bank in the middle there where there's, 30 to 40% who agree. You've got 18% who say there's no role. Right down the bottom is give leadership at public events, such as Anzac Day, convert people to the faith, give public comment on political issues. So what we have is some areas where there's common ground between what the church thinks it should be doing and what the community, what Australians say, and there is clearly a contested space about the role of religious organisations in society today. So just to highlight that again, those are the 3 areas that Australians most commonly want. Could you please look after our poor? You're very good at that. You've started lots of excellent organisations to do it. We'd like you to carry on, please.
But don't comment on why they're poor.
No, that's right. And then could you encourage good morals, but not for me and not in my private life, thank you very much. But for all of them, could you please? So that is that's quite challenging when you go religion, ethics and society. You go, could you please do the ethical piece for us? Be moral policemen. No, don't be moral policemen. Like that ambivalence about don't give public comment, but could you please make sure that they don't do things I don't like. then the rites of passage. We'd like to have you there for nice weddings, and you do quite a good job of funerals, and could you please, I'm being a bit facetious here, but you know, you get the flavour. But those other public roles are much more contested. I'm going to note again that when you compare, sometimes there's a stereotype that, oh, the people in the church are engaged in the church and they're so busy in the church that they don't get involved in the community. The data does not back that up. It does not support it. People of faith are engaged in acts of service at much higher levels than the wider community is. So faith and volunteerism go together. Which makes a challenge when you think about who, you know, if and it's ageing church attenders stop being able to be volunteers and society's relying on, you know, this wonderful volunteer workforce and these wonderful religious organisations, it's like, well, when they're not there, what do you think is going to happen, you know? So let me summarise. Very high level, gallop through. I put in my abstract, you know, it's complicated. So yes, it's true, I don't belong. Its salience, identity is not as salient as it once was. We have to acknowledge that, the data is there, and that's been a good long-term pattern that we're very clear about. And yet, spiritual expression persists. So you see that 6 in 10 believe in God or a higher power, open to supernatural experience. A third are engaging in private spiritual practices, and 22%, as of May this year, say they attend religious services at least once a month. I've noted that being religious is positively related to wellbeing, and also that perhaps surprising finding that younger Australians are more engaged, or at least curious, about faith. In terms of religious organisations, I've said there's some common ground, and noted that people of faith are those who are actually doing the work more often, and yet the fact that those other roles are contested means that religion in society, or being the church in particular, you know, is a contested space. Particularly that public speaking part is, I think, very challenging. Where's this going to go? Well, I'm curious. I'll keep watching as long as I can, but I note that perhaps patterns are fairly stable at the moment. And there's actually very little change over the last decade. And it's going to be critical to watch generations and the change of generations, because what those younger ones will bring through and the way they are shaped will continue on into the future. So tracking that. There we go.
Let's give. Thank you very much, Ruth. Excellent presentation. I'm sure people have questions. We have quite a few people joining us via Zoom as well in the room. So to the people on Zoom, could I please, if you want to ask a question, you're very welcome to. Could I ask you to use the hand up function in Zoom, and I'll try and keep abreast of the two spaces, the embodied and virtually embodied that we have. If you're here, just a show of in person, a show of hands will do fine. Let's open it up, and please be as succinct as you can, because we have, I think, about 10 or 12 of us collectively, and a lot of people will have a question. Doug?
Yeah, my question is one, it's an issue of measurement. Does the fact that an increasing number of youth, I suppose, no, that's a younger group. I'm just wondering whether the fact of having significant numbers attending schools, but that's a younger age group, that have religious services.
Yes, this survey is 18 upwards adults. Yeah. However, we've launched this year a project, it's a survey called the Student Spiritual Life Survey. It's designed for faith-based schools particularly, and we're running that. So if you know of schools that would like to try it, you're most welcome, but it's happening, and we're asking we're using this survey. It's shaped the student survey and possibly a staff survey. We'll see, the Lutherans are testing whether we might do a staff survey for them as well. But that is picking up the younger age groups. So we're going to be learning a lot, and schools are already learning a lot about their own cohort as well.
Bishop,
Mark,
sorry.
You do it, Jonathan.
Bishop Mark, and we'll come to.
Ruth, to what extent is the age a proxy for cultural diversity? In other words, are culturally, for a better term, non-Anglo communities within Australia younger on average, and therefore, yeah. So I'm just working at how does age and cultural diversity interact with each other in that data?
Yes, we know generally that those from non-English speaking backgrounds tend to be more religious. I'm not sure at this national level whether it's going to be the whole story, because when you just look at ethnic background, often it's like there's no difference and it's not the big decider. Age is more powerful. We would have to dive in to look at age and ethnicity and their attitudes or their practices to see. So there may be some of it, but I think this is bigger than that because it's a full national sample.
Yeah.
So yeah, I don't think they would swing it that much.
That much.
I think you're right, but I don't think they'd swing it that much.
I think I said Peter next and you're immediately after, don't let me forget.
Thanks, Ruth. That's fascinating. Some of those numbers are quite surprising, and particularly the sort of 22% of regular church attendance. When I had a look at those numbers myself a few years ago, I think I looked at weekly church attendance. So that 22% seems to me to drop fairly quickly to around about 6 or 7% if you're looking at it as a weekly event. Is that a fair?
Yes, that's right. That's right. So even the most committed, this is also measuring religious service attendance. So it is picking up mosques and synagogues, but that's a very small proportion. So we're mostly listening to church attendance here, but just to clarify, it's everybody. So we go once a month because even among the most committed people don't go every week. And so those who are trying to be precise actually end up saying, we look at least once a month. It's been a measure we've been able to be consistent over time. So you're right, it's about 6 or 7% of Australians attend weekly, and that if you're younger, it's less regular. But once you put that sort of scope of a month, that was the big surprise that, it was as high as it was for the younger ones, yeah. Because they've got no reason now. They've got no cultural pressure to say they attend. Like in the US, you go, oh, I'm a church attender. Yes, I am. And, we haven't had that in Australia for a long time. So,
Yeah.
I'm very interested in this survey that you're doing for schools, right? That you've said. My reading is that a significant generational change has been in the teachers and in the teacher training.
Yep.
And I go back in teacher training 40 years in Australia, 45 years. And the difference in the training of the teachers, and now, for example, in Catholic schools, the work that's being done in Australia by Australian Catholic University, I think Broken Bay, which is on developing the teacher's spirituality so that they can help the students.
yes.
My other experience with primary school age students is that those students who are Christian are actually evangelizing, and so are many of the secondary students. So children who have no family background are suddenly saying, my friend has told me about Jesus and I want to go to that service. So that, I don't know if you have any data about that, but certainly it would be easy to get data about teacher training.
Indeed, yes.
Yeah.
And that's why I think why the Lutherans are going, we need to understand where our staff are up to, but we've certainly heard with the Catholic schools, them being very concerned about if this is one of the key places, if people are not being formed or in a parish context or church context, teachers are critical at that point. And if the teachers don't have their own formation, that's certainly a challenge. And I think that's very real.
There's also a perspective that train the teachers, get the teachers to work with the kids in schools, and then make the links to the parish. So you've got 2 generations of that coming up.
It's challenging. What we know about intergenerational transmission of faith is it is very much those who, what forms you most powerfully in terms of faith is the person who is most influential is your mother. no matter what age you are, from the primary school surveys we do, right through to the 88-year-olds, 98-year-olds, who is the person who's most influenced and shown you what it is to be a person of faith, a Christian? My mother, followed by my father, followed by my grandparents. If you have a family of faith, if you come from a family of faith, you are most likely to actually make it through. This is from our church data. Of all people who attend churches, we ask them about their children attending, and the proportion of children who've been retained, whether you're talking a 50-year-old or I've got the picture and I actually took it out of this presentation. Basically, we're hanging on to 4 in 10 of our own kids if we are church families. So we're retaining 4 in 10. If you're Asian Australian, 6 in 10. So there's the ethnic. More Asian Australians from different backgrounds are more effective at retaining their kids as part of going to some church somewhere. So I think they're really key. What we're seeing in some of the schools already with the results is, like, particularly say that Jesus one, horrified the number of kids at a Christian school. They're going, we've just done Christian studies all year, we've done Christian development. How do they not even know that Jesus is a real person, let alone anything else? And so some of them are already going, our target is to have 0 on, was Jesus a real, Jesus did not exist. We want 0. We want every child to at least leave this school knowing Jesus was a person, So yeah, they're seeing that same pattern come through.
That's setting the bar quite low. We've got a couple of questions on Zoom. Well, Neil had his hand up first, and once Neil finishes, Paul, it's over to you. Neil?
Yeah, thanks, Ruth. Can you hear me? Okay.
I'm going to turn you up just a touch.
Look, just in relationship to the sort of 18 to 34-year-olds, we've always had this sort of, I suppose, explanation within Catholic Church that this is the age where people are marrying and having kids, and they have this period where they want to bring their kids up, at least through certain sacramental things. But then by the time they hit their sort of teenage years and the kids get less interested and the parents get less interested, so it drops off. Would that be a reasonable sort of, at least one way of trying to understand why those 18 to 34-year-olds are attending church and why it then drops off in the later years?
Yes, the analysis you're doing is what we describe as, there's an age period cohort. You understand someone's age. When you hear how old a person is, there are 3 ways to understand it. I'll do this very briefly. Age period cohort. One is their age is they are of a biological age. They're at a certain life stage. So that used to be easier because you were little, then you grew up, you got married, you had babies, you were in, young families. That was a life stage. And then you had older children, and then you were retired and all that. And so your life stage impacts on your religious engagement. So it was very classic, exactly as you said. They come, they have kids, they leave when they're young adults, then they have kids, then they come back to church. So it's okay. They'll always come back. And then from the 1960s onwards, they didn't come back. They left and they didn't come back. So that was that big cultural change. So age, period is the historical period where there's stuff going on that impacts on every generational group, no matter how old you are. A war's happening, that affects everybody. Cohort is your generational cohort, which is you are born in a particular era, you are formed as a young adult because of the context of that time, and that then you carry how you've been formed, you carry that through your whole life stage. So now that's the hottest. So now everybody uses the generational labels of baby boomer, etc. But you're naming a cohort effect, which is you were born in the baby boom, you grew up in a time of prosperity, the world was your oyster, and you've gone through your whole life, like they describe, like a mouse in a boa constrictor. You can always tell where the baby boom is. There's so many of them impacting society. And so now whatever they think impacts on whatever that's going on for them. So that's a cohort effect. So you're describing a life stage effect, which I think is intersecting with the cohort and period effect. Secularization is a period effect. So you're picking up life stage, which used to be much more powerful, still has an impact, but is no longer the whole story. So when I think of those 18 to 34-year-olds, I'm going, no, there's something else going on for them now because of the world they're growing up in that is forming them. and we can't guarantee that they will follow through in the same way.
Paul? I think you're on mute, Paul.
Can't hear you.
Fantastic stuff, Ruth, and I think gives lie to the fable that NCLS is just about the church. This stuff is about society. But the question I have is about the numbers that you showed us on religion and wellbeing. I mean, as you indicated, there's a huge literature trying to connect those two. But the issue is always the causality. Is it that religious people go to is it that happy people go to church, or is that religious participation makes people happier? Do you have anything in your data that helps you answer that causality question?
No, I stay away from causality questions. But I think, even if you say they're correlated, they're related, you go, it just makes sense that, is it the opium of the masses? Yes, partly. Is it because you need a crutch? Yes, partly. The most broken people are in the churches as well, of course. And at the same time, you go, if we gather and we have social infrastructure, we have physical infrastructure that helps people gather on a regular basis, and we recite and recall patterns of meaning and purpose, that's got to have an impact. When you go, if human flourishing, Aristotelian's, idea of human flourishing as part of well-being, you go, well, that's about meaning and purpose, living a whole life. Well, that's part of what we get served up every time we sit in a church, is there's something more, your life is purposeful, you're made in the image of God. Like that's got to be, I think, formative for the Christian community particularly. And other religions as well, So there's lots of reasons that it makes sense that the deeper, more sustaining your faith and your connectedness in community. I think we constantly go to the individualistic level and think about that, where I'm absolutely convinced of the collective power that I think churches or religious communities offer, which enables well-being at a collective level as well as individuals. So in a sense, it doesn't matter. The one thing I'm aware of, though, is, Christians may be more highly educated, probably more socially well off. So you feel better about life if you're not freezing and you're not hungry, like there's that. So maybe there's a bit of a bias in there as to go, that's why you're more satisfied with life, because your life's okay. But I think I still think there's more to it. And yeah.
So you don't really have anything in the data, but you're saying there's a plausible causal story attached to your preferred direction.
Yes. We could play, someone could have a fun working out some way we could test it causally, but yeah, I'm not going to go there.
Well, economists have those techniques. But yeah, sure.
Peter, you had another question?
Just, do we have a sense of where the 18 to 34-year-olds are going? I mean, I have the impression that it's often not to the mainstream churches, that some of the more active, the Pentecostal sort of environments appeal more to the people in their 20s. And
Yes. If we talk about the age, this is drawing on the church data now from the Church Life Survey. If we look at the age profile of different denominations, certainly the Anglican, Catholic, Uniting, Lutheran, Presbyterian have a much older age profile, and the Pentecostal and Baptists and Salvation Army, etc. Pentecostal has the youngest age profile. They used to be younger than the Australian population in general, and I've had to tell them that they're no longer. They look more like the Australian population. So everybody's aging, and even the Pentecostals are aging, but they still have a much younger age profile. Again, our migrant ethnic communities are younger generally, so they bring it in. But I'll just say, again, it's always a bit mixed up, because we've just done a project for the Uniting Church in Victoria and Tasmania, and they want to know about the charismatic and Pentecostal people in their midst, because they're going, oh, who's candidating for ministry? Who's actually engaged in churches? And going, we've got a charismatic group of people and we need to actually listen and take them seriously. So that's a lovely little project that we're going, we can tell you about them, and we have, and we're about to deliver that report. So, you know, pockets everywhere.
Bishop Mark, you'll have to be the final question asker.
Okay, it's really a question about the broader conversation about faith and mission in Australia. I think a lot of our conversations are driven by narratives that come out of the US.
Mm.
So at the moment, there's a lot of talk about deconstruction and deconversion, which is driven by US understanding that the last 15 years there's been this cataclysmic fall off in religious involvement. Now, whether or not that's true for the US, your data suggests it's not true in the same way for Australia. So what faith and missional conversations do you think we're not having because we're not paying specific attention to what's happening here?
Yeah. I think we are too driven by the US and have been for too long, and they are behind us on this, if you like. It's where Europe and the UK are more useful for us from some perspectives because of their what's happening in their religion in society and the navigating the negotiation that's happening. I think that's one space. But picking up what you were saying earlier, Wayne, we are not listening to our own neighbours. You know, we are located in an Asian context, an Asia Pacific context. And why are we not having those conversations? Because again, where is there life in the churches? Where is there more engagement and possibility? Well, it's our multicultural church, and specifically it's our non-Anglo people who are, you know, and so what do we learn when I tell you that Asian Australian families are more likely to retain their kids, and I'm talking 50-year-olds and 60-year-olds, not just the current young ones, but what are they doing? And I think it's something about collective understanding, not individualistic worldview that we should be tapping into. But I think that's the kind of gift that being a multicultural society and being one of the most multicultural, I think we have more multicultural churches by twice as many, maybe 3 times as many as the US does. Again, it's like we should be leading the way on that and showing good practice in diversity and how to be in ethnic and cultural diversity, because again, I'll tap into psychology here, but social tolerance theory says when you know people, even if you don't like them, if you know them and you have proximity to them, you are more likely to be tolerant of them. So we've got these churches with people who are different ethnically, culturally, hopefully age, but less on that front. But, you know, it just means what a wonderful opportunity to do something new and different in Australia. So we can learn and push the boundaries of what multicultural church looks like. Again, we're good in the congregations. We're not so good on leadership. We've got to grow multicultural leadership as well. So that's where I think we should be absolutely going with our strengths, if you like, and seeing what we can learn and grow there.
Thank you.
Ruth, thank you so much. The research you do and the data you have is absolutely invaluable, and you've definitely demonstrated that here today. So thank you very much for that, and thank you to everyone who has attended in person and via Zoom. I trust that you all benefited immensely. Let's show Ruth once more out. And we'll see you all again here in person or online at our next CRES lecture in August, so stay tuned for that. Thank you.
And thanks for organising.